Hello friends, this is Scott, and today's video is about how to create a backyard oasis for birds and other animals and wildlife. Now, a lot of people have just generic backyards and you just don't even hear a bird chirping. There's not any sounds or anything. But what I've been able to do here is do some essential elements to bring birds into the backyard and other types of animals. I'm going to give you a little peek at what I have to enjoy. Here is, I'm sneaking up on a house finch. And the house finch doesn't see me yet, but oh, what's that? Okay, I don't know about this guy now, but this is our lazy house finch that likes to just sit on the feeder and just sit there all day and basically eat. And likes to kick the seed out of the feeder as it's sorting through the seed. And then the chickens down below will get a little bit of a treat. Now this is a Niger feeder. And as you see here, there's goldfinches and other types of birds. I never had goldfinches in my yard because I wasn't feeding this type of seed. So the type of seed does matter, but it's pretty cool. I've got tons of goldfinches that now frequent the yard, and they basically live here all year long. So they're very pretty. And since we built the deck off the back of our house on the top level, we've been able to be up here in the kind of up in the sky, about 20 feet in the air, and can really get an intimate look at these birds and how they live their lives. But you got to keep this feeder full because they go through it in about a day. It doesn't take too long. But there's a beautiful goldfinch right there. You know, obviously the colorful ones are the males, and the less colorful ones are the females. And it's not the way it is in human life, but it is in the animal kingdom. Now, here's an assortment of birds. There's even there's the house finch up above, and you got some goldfinches, quite a few, and they're just fun to watch. I really enjoy having these birds around. You know, birds are not always a positive thing in the garden. I'll discuss here in a little bit. There are some negatives to having birds and feeding birds in your backyard, but I think the positives outweigh the negatives. But it does cause some headaches in the old garden when you have a lot of birds. They can do some damage to the garden, and particularly with small seedlings, like tender stuff like peas and carrot tops and radishes. They like to just munch those down to nothing. But when you start feeding seed, you start getting other types of birds showing up. And here we have some quail. These quail, you know, we've seen them occasionally, but we haven't had a big quail population in our neighborhood. But they're starting to become more and more, and they're now enjoying the backyard. And they come in and they enjoy the seed, but they also come and they kick through the garden. And they really like the back-eaten garden. They like the wood chips, and they're just like chickens. They're just mini chickens. They're very similar in their behavior, but they're fun to watch. And just having some seed in the yard and as one of the elements has brought them here, and they're fun to watch. Now, we talked a little bit about other types of seeds, thistle seeds and Niger seeds, but when you want doves, these are ringneck doves, and we have mourning doves also, and they like the sunflower seeds. So when you feed a sunflower seed mix, some other types of seed, obviously, you'll get those in there, and they like to come in here and they like to feed. They usually like to feed off the ground, but these two will like to feed off my platform feeder, and so it's fun to see them. I have probably 6 doves, 3 couples that frequent the yard regularly. But when you do back-to-eaten gardening and you do a lot of wood chips and you have a lot of worms, and you have some flowering pear trees in the backyard, they're supposed to be fruitless, but they do produce a little bit of fruit. You get the robins. So we have tons of robins coming through the yard. And we even have some exotics. Here's a woodpecker. This is a hairy woodpecker, I believe. And we get some northern flickers too. But when you feed birds, you got to be consistent, because if you start feeding them during the year and then you don't feed them in the winter, you're going to kill a bunch of birds, because they're going to stick around when they think they have a food source. And if you take away that food source or are not consistent with it, you're going to kill some birds. So you got to feed them through the winter and make sure they're taken care of. It's important. Anytime I go on vacation, I'm always making sure I keep the feeders full before we go, because they need to eat too. And in the winter, normally these birds would not be in my backyard, so I've enjoyed them, so I've got to take care of them. So I do my part in this relationship. Providing a food source is one of the essential elements for successfully having a bird oasis, but that's only one of them. I kind of count 3 that I think are the most important. Okay. First is feed. You got to have something to eat. That's very important. But the next step is they need to have a place to live. And I mean a safe place to live. Now, here's some of the birdhouses in my yard that I've built and just placed them throughout. And they're just simple boxes. Now, not all birds nest in boxes. Some nest on ledges, some make nests in trees. Every bird is a little bit different. Different requirements regarding maybe hole size or the size of the actual house that you provide to them. Now here's a gourd house that was purchased, and it's got a problem. It's got a perch. And my birdhouses that I build do not have perches for one reason: predators. Blue jays, hawks, things like that could land on a perch. Starlings, and they can pull the babies out of the nest. So you don't want perches. I do have a few that have perches, and I try to remove them when I remember to. But all my birdhouses I build now, none of them have perches. Now, as I have chickens, as you see here, they're out free ranging in the yard. They interact well with the birds. The little birds are in with them, with feeding, and every time I throw a scratch in the ground, the birds are in it. What becomes a problem, though, is when you have this many birds and you're providing this much shelter, they just keep reproducing and keep coming back. And here's another gourd birdhouse, and that one's always used. But what happens is they'll get into the chicken coop and they'll drink the water, and then they'll get into the food. So you got to have a tight birdhouse to keep them out if you can. Here's a woodpecker house that's been taken over by starlings, and it's up on the side of my house 20 feet in the air. Provide birds safe housing, they have babies, and they have successful broods. But if you don't have safe houses or the predators get to them, the birds will fall out of the nest or they'll get yanked out and they die. Last essential element is water. Now, there's one fish, I think, or maybe I have two that have died in the pond, sidebar. But this water source has been a real godsend for the animals. The chickens enjoy it when I let them out in free ranging. And then there's all the other animals in bird life get attracted by this water source. So that can be good and that can be bad, just depending upon what shows up to the pond. Here's a quail in the summer or late fall last year. It was getting a drink out of the pond. And so it's neat to see them. And it helps bring more wildlife into the yard. But again, when you have prey animals, you're going to have other things happen too. And when you have spilled seed, you've got mice. And so mice are something that you're not going to avoid if you feed seed. So here's a couple that I had last year that were living in a hole right next to the feeder. So they're cute, but when you see one, you've got 7. So there's a couple here, and I've got who knows how many. So that leads you to having a problem of having rodents, and you got to control the rodent population. But again, they're another prey species. So sometimes people call backyard birds rodents with wings. Mice are around, and then you have squirrels. This is the only squirrel I've ever seen in my yard. It came in the yard last year, and it was kind of interesting, gray squirrel. But here's what comes when you have prey animals. You have falcons and hawks. And most of them that show up are a smaller size. They're not something that's going to take on a full-grown chicken, but you find piles of feathers all the time where they're hunting. So you're creating an environment that's healthy. It's creating places where wildlife wants to come. But that means the whole food chain is going to come, and you've got to be prepared for that. The last aspect that's kind of troublesome in the garden is when you're feeding birds and creating this oasis is you're going to have seed planted throughout the yard. Birds take seed and they just drop it or poop it out, and you end up, especially with sunflowers, you're going to have sunflowers everywhere where you didn't plant them. But they're pretty, but you have extra weeding to do when you feed seed to these wild birds. Well, I hope you liked today's video. And I enjoy my birds. And again, there's negatives to it, and sometimes I have to build some security for my plants as well as my chickens, just to try to keep everything healthy. With the avian flu going on right now, you don't want wild birds interacting with domesticated birds. But in my yard, it's kind of hard to avoid because I do let my chickens out and let them run around. So I hope you like this video, and I hope you get some ideas on how you can bring some life to your yard. And there's nothing better than going out in the summer and just hearing multiple species of birds just making a nice racket outside. It's fun to be outside, and they add a lot to the garden. Thanks for watching, and if you like what you see, please hit that subscribe button. Like, share, and comment. Thank you.